Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this postmortem of my Blitz game number 641. My opponent kicked off with knight f3, and I responded with knight f6, kind of a flexible response and just waiting to see what white has in mind. So this opening got classified as a Reti, I guess because he started as knight f3, but c3 is the second move. It's a very unusual move. If you play with c4, then you're just transposing into an English opening, or if you play with d4, then you're transposing into a queen-pawn opening. So g3 is the normal way the Reti continues. I think b3 would probably stay in Reti territory as well, but with this move c3, we actually get a position which is more like a call system than a Reti. Okay, so I go d5, and he goes d4. So this is interesting that this position is not in the database, but after a couple of moves, we transpose into a position that still is in the database. So I'll keep this up here. And this is all okay. I played e6 here. I guess in retrospect, I think bishop to f5 is probably a better move. It's just a more active square for that bishop. Makes a lot of sense to do that before blocking it in with e6. But this is still okay because white has also got a very quiet setup here. And then white, I was expecting white to play the London system with bishop to f4 or bishop to g5. The Tory attack is still possible here, I guess. But he goes knight bd2, so this indicates the call system. After c5, he goes e3. And that's this pawn triangle with the bishop still inside the triangle, the dark squared bishop. That's the call system. It's a system with a slow buildup. Keeping the center closed gives white time to organize the pieces the way he wants to. But it still has ideas of a kingside attack in the long run, often involving the push e3 to e4 and opening up that diagonal for the bishop. So it's not a toothless system. There's some dangerous attacking ideas there, but it is slow, and black should be okay with as long as he's careful. So bishop d6 is a reasonable move, just developing and preparing to castle. And he goes knight b3. At that point, we're really out of the opening book. These other lines in the opening book, bishop to d3 is a reasonable way to proceed. Knight c6, and both sides castle. This is a position which is about equal. It seems like black has a little more space, but black will lose a tempo at some point when white decides to take the c pawn here. The other way of playing this is with d takes c5, grabbing that pawn immediately and then developing, and also a position which is around equal. When white played knight to b3, he's actually giving black a slight edge here, although the best move for black is b6, according to the chess engine, and it makes a lot of sense. I wanted to show this. This is a system I often play against the London system, a setup I play against the London system. It's you just get easy development for the pieces. The bishop goes to b7, the knight to c6, you castle, and you have a little more space than white, so you're just slightly better in this kind of setup. So against the systems like this with the pawn triangle, I think that's a fine way to go. So anyway, I took on d4 with the idea that I didn't want him to be taking on c5 at an inconvenient time and forcing me to move my bishop. And so this is all in the range of about even again. So my chance to get a slight edge of the opening was with that b6 move. So we get some normal developing moves here. I kick the bishop, it drops back, and I castle. And he plays bishop d3. It seems white's a bit behind in development, but the center is still pretty closed. So it's not so much of a big deal. I try to open up the center right away, but it appears that white has enough time to take care of everything before I can get any pressure on his king. He just takes here. Oh, by the way, e5 was one of the recommended moves of the chess engine, so that was a reasonable way to play with e5. It's just it doesn't lead to any big advantage for black. It just leads to another position, which is about equal. So we get some exchanges here, and after that he has time to castle. So that's the key. White gets out of any potential trouble, and we have an okay position. Try to get my queen out. I want to unpin my knight and defend it from the side here. He goes queen f3, putting a little more pressure on my king's side, but I can kick his queen with bishop to g4. And now he plays queen e3. That maybe is a bit of a mistake. Anyway, the chess engine thinks black is better once again after the queen trade here, and it thinks I should trade queens. It thinks that's the right move here. Yeah, I didn't see any great moves with the queen other than that, and also it takes care of this weakness. I have a weak pawn here, the isolated queen's pawn, compensated for by some active pieces, but after the queens come off, those isolated pawns will become a weakness in the long run. But now he has an isolated pawn too, and mine's a little more advanced, so that's the nature of my advantage. I have a slight edge here with the more advanced isolated pawn. Anyway, I go knight e4 here. I wanted to get the knight away from being exchanged off. He goes bishop to e7. An interesting idea. He's kind of poking at my rook and forcing it to move around. He repeats this idea a couple of times, and it's an interesting one. You use your bishops to harass your opponent's rook. Sometimes you can force them onto awkward squares or even trap them. Anyway, he drops his bishop back to a3, keeping control of this diagonal, and I play bishop to h5. I want to reposition my bishop, and I also want to defend the f7 pawn, because one of the ideas of chasing the rook away from f8 is maybe to undermine the f7 pawn. Let's see, he played king h1, getting away from any potential checks along this file. I go bishop g6. I was completing my rearrangement of the bishop, putting it on this diagonal here. He goes bishop to b5, harassing my rook. I go over to c8, and then he plays his rook to c1. Play a6, kicking his bishop. Bishop drops back to e2. Now I play b5. So the chess engine has a different idea of how to play this position. It wants to keep the pawns on the king side and the queen side and trade off the center pawns. And it has a couple different ways of doing it, but they end up in the same position. One idea is to reposition the bishop around this way. That's this first line here, which is kind of strange. The more natural way to do it is with that second line. Bishop to f6, rook to d1, attacking this pawn, counterattacking his e-pawn, and then going for the trade. And the other line led to the same position. So the chess engine likes this for black. It's a bit mysterious to me. The pawn structure is not symmetric, but it's pretty equivalent. It's 3-on-2 on this side and 3-on-2 on this side. Nobody has more control over the center. I guess my pieces are more active. Maybe that's what my advantage is. My pieces are in the center and his are on the side. So maybe there's some way to exploit it. It would be a tough game to play. But anyway, the chess engine recommends this for black. Let's see, I played b5 and kept the pawns on. He went knight a5, and I went knight c5. I had an idea of repositioning this knight, and also I wanted to block that bishop and see if he wanted to trade it off. I'd be happy to get rid of that bishop and free up my rook to move along the back rank. But he left it there, and he played bishop to g4, harassing my rook again. So that's the third bishop attacking rook move. I play rook to c7, and I think things are still okay. He goes rook to d1, little pressure here on the d pawn, so I defend it with bishop e4. Now he goes bishop to f3, and now here I make a mistake. It's kind of a funny tactic, though. So I played the move f5. And this just loses a pawn. I guess what's not clear is that everything looks defended on the surface, but the bishop is actually overloaded. The bishop is defending two pawns, and after a trade of that bishop, both rooks are attacking those pawns. So those pawns are loose without that bishop there. So anyway, I didn't spot that idea, and he just took the bishop off and won a pawn. So it's a little tricky to play this position, actually. I think it's a little hard to find good moves. Bishop takes f3, for example, is not particularly good. He takes, and then I need to find a way to defend my d pawn, and puts me in kind of a passive position. The chess engine wants to exchange now, and then play knight to b7, and yeah, so it's worse than them being in a passive position. It's actually losing material. So it's really hard to defend that pawn. In fact, rook d8 was the mistake in this line. I have to actually give up a pawn here after this trade. So just taking the bishop doesn't solve my problems. But I can sit here. If he takes, and I'll just take back with the pawn, it opens up a line for his rook. but it doesn't lose material. So what I should do, according to the chess engine, is just kind of sit on this position and maybe maneuver my pieces. The engine is suggesting knight a4, maybe a little pressure on these pawns. Rook to f2, some defense along the side, rook to e8, and then finally black goes for this exchange, and white goes for the exchange and plays g3, and I drop my bishop back to f6, so everything is defended. And this knight still seems a bit out of play, but white's knight is out of play too, I guess. So anyway, that's the way the chess engine wants to play it, and it's about equal. After f5, I'm really just down a pawn. He takes, I take, and he doesn't play this in the most accurate way. Actually, he lets me get some compensation with the move knight to d3. So the chess engine wants to take the knight off first, and then grab the pawn. And then white is just a pawn up. So that would be good for white. And what he played is good for white as well, but I have a little bit of compensation here. He takes the pawn, and I get in knight to d3. And what's interesting about this is after a while, I was worried that he might take the knight and then take the bishop, getting two pieces for a rook. But he didn't go for that, and I looked at it later. It turns out it's not a good move. Rook takes, he takes here, and I've just got this dangerous passed pawn, and his two minor pieces aren't so well positioned to stop it, and this is actually winning for black. Rook to f7, the other rook to f7, threatening checkmate, king to g1, and then rook to d8. And so the king is cut off from being able to come over and defend against the pawn going forward, and my rook is behind it, and his rook is not in a position to block. So it ends up winning a piece to stop. White has to give up a piece to stop that pawn from becoming a queen, and black is just winning in that position. So he didn't go for that. He didn't take the knight, but instead he played g3. And I guess that gives his king a square to come out with. So no back rank mates. And then I give the game away in one move. I play rook to f8. My idea was to get rid of this rook, which is putting pressure on the knight, because I was still worried about him taking the knight and taking the bishop, which I didn't need to worry about. But well, if I wanted to get rid of the rook, I could have played g6, and then the rook drops back, and this position is okay for black. I'm down a pawn, but I have an excellent, well-posted knight there, and that's enough compensation. I should be okay. The other way I could play it, the chess engine line, is to push on with b4, trying to distract the bishop. And if the bishop takes, then grabbing this the b pawn, and then he's got, and I'm hitting the rook, so rook to b1, and then knight back to d3. So he's still got an extra pawn, but his pawns are starting to look kind of weak, and this is also okay for black. And the other option is if he takes here, trying to hold on to everything, then the rook comes to c2, and I win the b pawn anyway. Just no way to defend it according to the chess engine, although looking at this now, well, there is a threat of the check here. But why not rook to b1? Yeah, let's just take a brief look at that. After rook to b1, knight to f2 check, or g6, kicking the rook. Okay, g6, rook f to f1, so it's a longer story. Seems like he's holding on to all of his pieces. h5, or knight f2 check now. And he gives up the exchange. If the king moves, what's the problem here? Knight h3 check, king h1, knight to g5. You know, it's crazy, some of the lines the chess engines come up with. It goes on and on, but it keeps saying black is winning. So I guess there is some, let's turn the engine off. I guess there's some tactical point at the end of that, but well, I'm not sure I could find all of that in a game. So if we go back a few steps and look at this move here, yeah, rook to b1 might have been a way to hold this position. Anyway, Oh, that would have been interesting to play, but it's beside the point because I played the move rook to f8, trying to chase away his rook, and he just took it because the bishop is still here on a3. Looking at that square, I had forgotten about it. Anyway, and a sudden end to an interesting game. Hope you guys like this. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.